Elise cornered me at Dad's wake, her voice dripping sympathy as she announced she'd be handling everything as executor. I nodded, agreeable as always, while she handed me a coffee I didn't ask for. She'd already told half the family I was too emotional to be trusted. What she didn't know, I'd been running forensic audits on her for 3 months. The spreadsheets don't lie. Neither do embezzlement charges. The funeral director's office smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and something floral that wasn't quite flowers. Chemical lilies. Dad had been in the ground less than 6 hours when Elise started distributing photocopied contact lists she must have prepared days earlier, maybe while he was still breathing in that hospice bed with the broken call button. Her name sat at the top in 16-point font, primary estate contact. I watched her hand them out to cousins and aunts who took them without reading, grateful someone was organizing things, someone competent. I stood near the back wall of the reception area at Greenfield Memorial, holding the coffee she'd given me. Medium roast, lukewarm, tasted like it had been sitting in the carafe since morning. The cup was too hot on one side where the sleeve had slipped. I didn't drink it. Just held it because refusing would have caused a scene, and Rusty Klein doesn't cause scenes. Rusty agrees. Rusty nods. Rusty stays quiet in the back while decisions get made. 23 people filled that room. I counted. Aunt Diane, Uncle Morris, Cousin Janet with her husband whose name I'd forgotten again, the whole extended Klein family tree assembled to mourn Harold Klein, payroll manager at Bergman Textiles for 38 years, dead at 71 from pancreatic cancer that moved through him like a brush fire. 3 months from diagnosis to hospice to grave. Elise had been there for all of it, she reminded everyone. Elise took time off work. Elise managed his medications. Elise was the only one who showed up. She didn't say my name during that speech. Didn't need to. The implication hung there, Rusty wasn't there. Rusty kept working his office job an hour south, visiting on weekends like Dad was an obligation, not a dying father. The room absorbed this without comment. People nodded. Elise daubed at her eyes with a tissue that stayed dry. I set the coffee down on a side table next to a sympathy card someone had signed but not sealed. My hands felt steady. That surprised me. Inside my chest something was tightening, something mechanical and precise, like a ratchet clicking into place tooth by tooth. I recognized the sensation from work, from the moment you find the discrepancy in an audit and realize someone's been lying for months, maybe years. The intake of breath before you start building the case. Elise was still talking. She'd moved on to logistics. I've already changed Dad's voicemail password so we don't get those awful robocalls on his phone. I'll be coordinating with his bank and handling the probate filing. I know this is hard for everyone, especially Rusty. She looked at me then, her expression soft with manufactured concern. He and Dad were so close. Grief hits different people in different ways. Cousin Janet turned in her chair to give me a sympathetic smile. Aunt Diane mouthed, "It's okay, honey," across the room. Uncle Morris looked relieved someone competent was handling the money. I was being managed. Isolated. Rendered harmless through collective consensus before I'd even realized we were at war. I nodded. Smiled back at Janet. Let my shoulders slump just enough. Rusty the agreeable. Rusty the emotional. Rusty who'd probably fall apart if given real responsibility right now. The role fit like an old coat I'd worn for 62 years. Comfortable. Expected. Useful. What Elise didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that Dad had called me 4 months ago, back in May when he could still hold a phone without his hands shaking, and asked me to look at his financial records from the hardware store he'd sold back in 2018. Asked in that careful way he had when something was wrong but he didn't want to accuse anyone without proof. Just check the payroll disbursements from 2014 through 2017, Rusty. Something doesn't add up. I need your eye on it. I'd checked. Built the spreadsheet over 3 weeks of evenings, cross-referencing his bank statements with the store's payroll logs, the ones he'd kept in his basement filing cabinet under the workbench that still smelled like sawdust and machine oil. Found 23 unauthorized payments to a consulting company that didn't exist, paid to an account in Elise's name, totaling $142,600. Forged approval signatures. Backdated invoices. Textbook embezzlement, competent enough to fool a casual review but sloppy when you actually ran the numbers. Dad had read my report in June. Sat at his kitchen table with the printouts I'd prepared, each discrepancy highlighted, each forged signature marked. He'd cried. Not loud. Just silent tears running down his face while he stared at his daughter's name repeated in the payee column. Then he'd asked me not to do anything. Not yet. She's still my girl, Rusty. Family's family. Let me talk to her first. He never did. Or if he did, Elise convinced him to stay quiet. The cancer moved too fast. By July he was in hospice. By August he couldn't hold a conversation longer than 10 minutes. By September he was gone, and Elise was handing out contact lists with her name at the top. I left the reception early. Told Janet I needed air, which was true enough. The parking lot outside Greenfield Memorial was half empty, the asphalt still wet from afternoon rain that had stopped before the service. My car was a 2012 Camry with a dent in the rear quarter panel from where someone had backed into me at the grocery store last year. I sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine and watched Elise through the windows, still working the room, still collecting sympathy and authority in equal measure. My phone was in my jacket pocket. Old iPhone with a cracked screen protector I'd been meaning to replace for 8 months. I opened the encrypted folder where I'd stored Dad's audit. The file was labeled, Klein Hardware Payroll Analysis, May 2025. 73 pages. Transaction logs, signature comparisons, bank routing numbers, everything you'd need to prove systematic fraud in a court of law. Dad had asked me not to act while he was alive. He'd been dead for 6 hours and 43 minutes. I checked the time on the dashboard clock. 4:17 in the afternoon, September 14, 2025. The promise had expired the moment his heart stopped. I forwarded the complete audit file to my personal email, my backup cloud drive, and a thumb drive I kept in the glove compartment under the owner's manual. 3 copies. Belt and suspenders. Old habits from 4 decades of managing other people's money. Then I started the car and drove home to my apartment on Riverside Drive, a 1-bedroom 3rd-floor walk-up with water stains on the ceiling and neighbors who fought every Thursday like clockwork. I made instant coffee in a measuring cup because I'd stopped buying mugs after the divorce. Sat at my particle board desk and opened my laptop. Elise wanted executor status. Wanted control of the estate, control of the narrative, control of the family network she'd been cultivating for 3 years while Dad declined. She positioned herself perfectly. The responsible daughter. The devoted caretaker. The competent one who'd handle everything while poor emotional Rusty fell apart. I opened a new spreadsheet and titled it, Klein Estate, Timeline and Evidence. Started logging events with timestamps. Dad's death at 9:32 a.m. Elise's announcement at the funeral home at 2:47 p.m. Her distribution of contact lists. Her statement that she'd already changed his passwords, which meant she'd done it before he died or immediately after, which meant premeditation. The timeline was a weapon. I just had to aim it carefully. My phone buzzed. Text message from Elise. Family meeting at my place next Saturday to discuss estate settlement. 1 p.m. Can you make it? I know this is hard but we need to move forward together. I read it 3 times. The phrasing was perfect. Inclusive language. Acknowledgement of grief. Subtle pressure wrapped in concern. She was good at this. Had probably been practicing on Dad for years, reframing her theft as help, her embezzlement as dedication. I typed back, I'll be there. Thanks for organizing everything. Sent it. Set the phone down. Stared at the spreadsheet on my screen where Elise's name appeared 23 times in the column labeled, Fraudulent Payee. She thought I was broken. Thought grief had made me passive. Thought agreeable Rusty would stay agreeable forever, nodding while she looted Dad's estate the same way she'd looted his hardware store. She'd forgotten what I did for a living. Forgot that office managers don't just file papers and order supplies. We audit. We verify. We find the discrepancies people think they've hidden. I wasn't grieving. I was working. And the work had just begun. The apartment was quiet except for the refrigerator's hum and the muffled argument from next door, Thursday night tradition. I sat at the particle board desk I'd bought from a clearance rack 7 years ago, the kind that comes in a flat box with an Allen wrench and instructions in 4 languages. The surface was scratched near the left corner where I dragged a stapler too hard once. Coffee ring stains formed overlapping circles near the monitor. I'd stopped trying to keep things pristine after Linda left. Stopped caring about appearances when there was nobody left to appear for. The desk lamp threw yellow light across the laptop screen, making my eyes ache, but I didn't turn on the overhead fluorescent. That buzzing sound made it hard to think. I needed to think. The coffee in the measuring cup had gone cold an hour ago, filmy residue forming on the surface. I drank it anyway. Tasted like burnt metal. My throat was dry from breathing through my mouth, a habit I'd developed during tax season when concentration required blocking out everything else. The file cabinet sat 3 feet away, dented green metal with a stuck bottom drawer I'd never bothered fixing. Third drawer from the top held everything I needed. I pulled it open. The sound of metal sliding on metal needed oil, but I'd been saying that for 2 years. Inside were accordion folders organized by year and category. Klein family, financial. I'd kept Dad's records since he'd asked me to help with his taxes back in 2009, after Mom died and he couldn't face the paperwork alone. 16 years of documentation. Bank statements, property records, business filings from the hardware store, investment accounts, every transaction that mattered. I pulled the folder labeled Klein Hardware, Payroll Records 2014 through 2017, and spread the contents across the desk. The paper was printer stock, slightly yellowed at the edges, covered in my handwriting from the analysis I'd done in May. Each page represented hours of cross-referencing, the methodical work of finding discrepancies between what the book said and what actually happened. 23 fraudulent transactions. $142,600. Elise's name on every one. The evidence was irrefutable. Dad had known that when he read my report. Sat at his kitchen table with those pages spread out just like this, his hands shaking from the Parkinson's that had already started by then, and cried. I'd never seen him cry before. Not at Mom's funeral. Not when the hardware store sale fell through the first time and he thought he'd lose everything. But this broke him. His daughter. His Elise. The one who'd always been there, always been helpful, always been involved. I'd built the case like I'd build any audit. Start with anomalies. Follow the money trail. Document everything. The consulting company, E. Klein Services, had been registered as a sole proprietorship in January 2014, right after Dad hired Elise as his office manager at the store. The address listed was a P.O. box in a strip mall 2 towns over. No business license. No tax returns filed. It existed only on paper, and only long enough to receive payroll disbursements Dad supposedly approved. Except the signatures weren't his. I'd compared them to his actual signature on contracts, tax documents, bank forms. The forgeries were decent. Same general shape. But the pressure was wrong, the angle of the downstrokes, the way his real signature always had that slight tremor in the capital K. The fake ones were too smooth. Too confident. Whoever forged them had practiced but hadn't lived in his body, hadn't felt the way his wrist stiffened when he signed important documents. I'd paid $300 to a handwriting analyst I'd worked with on a previous corporate case. Her affidavit was 12 pages of technical analysis concluding the signatures were inconsistent with the known exemplars of Harold Klein and highly likely to be simulations. Legal language for forgery. That affidavit was clipped to the back of the payroll analysis. I had bank records showing the deposits into Elise's personal account within 48 hours of each fraudulent payment. Had the invoices she'd created, billing for, business consulting services, and operational efficiency analysis. Generic corporate language that meant nothing. I had everything needed to prosecute. Dad had looked at that evidence and said no. She's my daughter, Rusty. She made a mistake. Maybe she needed the money. Maybe she was in trouble and didn't know how to ask. I can't destroy her over this. Just can't. His voice had broken on that last word. We'd sat in silence for 10 minutes while he processed it. Then he'd asked me to promise not to act while he was alive. Let me handle it my way. Let me talk to her. Find out why. Maybe we can fix this without lawyers and courts and family wars. I'd promised. Given my word because he was my father and he was dying and I understood the calculus he was running. Better to lose money than a daughter. Better to pretend it didn't happen than face the truth publicly. I understood it. Didn't agree with it, but understood. For months later he was dead and Elise was already executing phase 2 of her strategy. Estate executor. Control of the accounts. Positioning herself as the responsible one while painting me as too emotional to handle financial decisions. She'd stolen from him while he was alive. Now she was preparing to steal from him dead. And she thought I'd let it happen because agreeable Rusty always let things happen. Rusty who stayed late at the office when others left early. Rusty who took the smaller Christmas bonus without complaint. Rusty who nodded when his ex-wife Linda explained she needed most of the furniture and the good car because she was rebuilding her life. Rusty the doormat. Rusty the accommodating. I stared at the evidence spread across my desk and felt the tightness in my chest intensify. Not rage. Something colder. The mechanical click of a decision made and locked in place. I'd spent 62 years being agreeable because it was easier than fighting. Because conflict gave me headaches. Because I'd learned early that if you just stayed quiet and did your work, people eventually left you alone. Dad had asked me to extend that agreeability to Elise despite her theft. I'd honored that request because he'd earned it. 38 years at Bergman Textiles supporting a family. Never complained. Never cut corners. He taught me that work by example, the steady accumulation of small dignities over decades. He deserved my compliance while he was alive. He was no longer alive. The promise had expired the moment his heart stopped. The obligation was fulfilled. What remained was evidence and capability and the simple professional question, what do you do when you find fraud? You document it. You report it. You let the system correct the discrepancy. I opened a new document on my laptop and titled it, Klein Estate, Evidence Compilation. Started building the master file. Transaction log with dates and amounts. Signature analysis with the expert affidavit. Bank records showing deposits. Corporate registration showing the shell company. Timeline of Dad's decline and Elise's increasing control. Her statement at the funeral that she'd already changed his passwords, which I now understood as evidence of premeditation. She'd been preparing to take control of his accounts before he died. Maybe days before. Maybe hours. I added a note to verify the exact timing of those password changes with the banks. If she'd done it while he was still alive but incapacitated, that was elder financial abuse. If she'd lied and done it after, that was unauthorized access. Either way, it was criminal. My phone sat face down next to the keyboard. I picked it up. Opened the text from Elise about the family meeting. 1 p.m. Can you make it? I know this is hard but we need to move forward together. That phrasing. Move forward together. Meaning move forward with her plan. Her timeline. Her control. She expected me to show up compliant and grateful that someone competent was handling the difficult work. Expected me to sign whatever documents she prepared, accept whatever distribution she proposed. She'd underestimated me completely. Mistaken 40 years of professional competence for incompetence. Mistaken my quietness for weakness. The oldest mistake in the book. I'd let her keep making it. The family meeting was in 2 days, Saturday at 1 in the afternoon. I had 48 hours to prepare. Not enough time to file legal motions or contact prosecutors. But enough time to document everything. Enough time to have answers ready for every question. Enough time to play my role perfectly. I would show up at Elise's house. I would sit quietly while she presented her estate settlement plan. I would ask careful questions that sounded like confusion but were actually verification. I would let her believe she was winning. And I would document every word, every claim, every promise she made. Let her commit to her version of events before I revealed the truth. Let her cross the point of no return. I saved the evidence file and backed it up to 3 locations: laptop, external drive, cloud storage. Then I opened my desk drawer and found the small digital voice recorder I'd used for meeting notes back when I was still working full-time. Checked the battery. Dead. I plugged it into the charger and watched the red light come on. By Saturday it would be ready. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window across the room. 62 years old. Thinning gray hair. Reading glasses hanging from a lanyard around my neck. Rumpled button-down shirt I'd worn to the funeral and hadn't changed out of. I looked exactly like what Elise thought I was, a harmless old man too tired and sad to fight back. Perfect camouflage. I turned back to the laptop and kept working. The evidence file grew. Transaction by transaction. Document by document. The systematic construction of a case that would end with my sister in handcuffs and me in control of Dad's estate. Not revenge. Correction. Just fixing what was broken. Eliminating the malfunction. It was almost midnight when I finally stopped. My eyes burned. My lower back ached from sitting too long in the cheap desk chair. The neighbors had finished fighting and started the makeup phase, which was somehow louder. I closed the laptop and sat in the yellow lamplight, surrounded by evidence of my sister's greed. Dad had protected her because he loved her. I would destroy her because he couldn't. The promise had been kept. The obligation was fulfilled. The work continued. Saturday arrived with rain that turned the streets slick and made the windshield wipers on the Camry screech every third pass. I drove to Elise's house in the suburbs, a neighborhood of identical vinyl-sided colonials with attached garages and small yards behind chain-link fences. Her place was the fourth one on Maple Court, painted beige with brown trim, a decorative flag hanging by the front door that said, "Welcome friends," in curling script. 2 cars were already parked in the driveway when I arrived at 12:57, 3 minutes early. Uncle Morris's truck and Cousin Janet's sedan. I sat in my car for those 3 minutes, engine running, heat on, watching rain streak down the glass. The voice recorder was in my shirt pocket, the size of a lighter, already running. I'd tested it that morning, speaking at normal conversation volume from across my apartment. Picked up everything clearly. Battery fully charged. 16 hours of recording capacity. More than enough. I turned off the engine and walked to the front door. Rang the bell. Heard footsteps inside and then Elise opened the door wearing black slacks and a cream sweater, her version of business casual. Her smile was warm and practiced. "Rusty, come in. You're soaked. Let me get you a towel." The house smelled like vanilla air freshener and something baking, cookies maybe, the kind of domestic staging people do when they want to seem nurturing. I stepped into the entryway and she handed me a hand towel with embroidered flowers. I dried my face and handed it back. "Thanks. Sorry I'm dripping on your floor." "Don't worry about it. Everyone's in the living room. Can I get you coffee?" "No, I'm fine." The living room had been set up like a conference room. Elise had pushed the coffee table against the wall and arranged folding chairs in a semicircle facing a single chair where she'd obviously planned to sit. Uncle Morris was there, Dad's older brother, 74 and half-deaf. Cousin Janet and her husband Derek. Aunt Diane, Mom's sister, who'd always liked Elise better than me. 5 people total, carefully selected. All people who'd already accepted Elise's narrative about her devotion and my emotional instability. I took a folding chair in the back row. Said hello to everyone. Uncle Morris gave me a sympathetic nod. Janet squeezed my hand as I sat down. "How are you holding up?" "Day by day," I said, and let my voice sound tired. Elise waited until everyone was settled, then took her position in the front chair. She had a leather portfolio on her lap, the expensive kind with a zipper and multiple compartments. Probably cost $200. She unzipped it with a crisp sound and pulled out printed documents, already collated and stapled. "Thank you all for coming. I know this is difficult, but we need to address Dad's estate and make sure everything is handled properly. I've consulted with an attorney and prepared a settlement plan that I think honors Dad's wishes while being fair to everyone." She distributed the packets. 5 pages each, printed on good paper. I took mine and glanced at the first page. Klein Estate Settlement Proposal, prepared by Elise Klein, executor. Except she wasn't executor yet. Hadn't been appointed by probate court. Was already using the title like it was fait accompli. I made a mental note. She continued, standing now, addressing the room like a presentation. Dad's total estate is valued at approximately $340,000. That includes the house in Briarcliff, his retirement account, his car, and some personal property. After settling debts and final expenses, the distributable estate is roughly $310,000. Uncle Morris squinted at his packet. What debts? Outstanding medical bills not covered by insurance. The funeral costs. Legal fees for probate. Standard estate expenses. She had a number listed, $30,000 in combined expenses. I scanned the itemization. Funeral costs of $8,000 made sense. But she'd listed $15,000 in caregiver reimbursement and $7,000 in estate management fees that she was paying to herself. Billing the estate for work she hadn't done yet, using executor authority she didn't have. I said nothing. Just highlighted those numbers with the pen I'd brought. Elise moved to the next page. The settlement proposal is straightforward. As executor and primary caregiver during Dad's final months, I'll receive 40% of the estate after expenses. That's $124,000. Rusty will receive 30%, $73,000. The remaining 30% will be distributed among the extended family. Aunt Diane spoke up. That seems reasonable. You did all the work, Elise. You were there every day. I tried my best. It wasn't about money, it was about making sure Dad was comfortable. But there were real costs. I took unpaid leave from work. I paid for things out of pocket. This reimbursement just makes me whole. Uncle Morris nodded slowly. Harold would have wanted you taken care of. You're a good daughter. The validation hit her like applause. I watched her posture straighten, her confidence build. She was surrounded by agreement, by people who confirmed her narrative. I was the only dissenting variable and I hadn't said a word. Janet looked at me. Rusty, are you okay with this? It's a lot less than Elise, but she did do most of the caregiving. I hesitated. Let the silence stretch. Then spoke quietly, like I was struggling to process. Can I ask about the caregiver reimbursement? $15,000 seems high. Elise's expression stayed patient, almost condescending. I kept detailed records. Mileage to and from Dad's house. Medications I purchased. Medical equipment. Groceries. It adds up quickly when you're managing someone's full-time care. Did you submit those receipts to his insurance? Some of that might be covered. I'm still working through insurance claims. This is just what I paid out of pocket. The answer was smooth. Too smooth. She'd prepared for basic questions. I nodded like that satisfied me and made another note. She'd just claimed under oath, or at least in front of witnesses, that she had detailed records of caregiving expenses. Discovery would force her to produce those records. If they didn't exist or were fabricated, that was fraud. Another piece locked into place. Derek, Janet's husband, raised his hand slightly. What about the house? Who gets that? The proposal is to sell it and split the proceeds according to the percentages I outlined. The real estate market is strong right now. We should be able to get at least $220,000, maybe more. Uncle Morris frowned. Your dad loved that house. Seems wrong to just sell it. I understand, but none of us need it. Rusty has his apartment. I have this house. Keeping it means paying property taxes and maintenance on an empty building. Selling is the practical choice. Practical. That word again. Elise's entire strategy was wrapped in practicality, reasonableness, the appearance of mature decision-making. She was positioning herself as the adult in the room making hard choices while everyone else was too emotional or impractical to handle reality. I raised my hand slightly, playing the part. What if I wanted to keep the house? Everyone turned to look at me. Elise's smile tightened just slightly at the edges. Rusty, you live an hour away. Do you really want to maintain a 3-bedroom house you're not using? I might want to move back. Retire closer to where we grew up. That's a lovely sentiment, but not practical. You'd need to buy out the other beneficiaries at fair market value. Can you afford $150,000 right now? She knew I couldn't. Knew my finances because we'd talked about them years ago, Back when Linda left and I'd mentioned I was stretched thin. Elise had positioned the question to highlight my limitations in front of the family. Make me look foolish for even suggesting it. I let my shoulders drop. No, I guess not. Then selling makes sense. We'll find a good realtor, get competitive bids, handle it properly. She'd won that exchange and knew it. I watched her turn back to the group, momentum building. This was going exactly as she'd planned. Compliant Rusty. Agreeable Rusty. Rusty who backed down when challenged. Aunt Diane spoke up. When does this go to probate court? I'm filing the executor petition Monday morning. My attorney says it's straightforward since there's no contest. The judge should approve it within 2 weeks. Then we can start the settlement process. No contest. She was assuming I wouldn't fight. Assuming I'd sign whatever she put in front of me, cash my $73,000 check, and disappear back to my apartment to live out the rest of my life in quiet mediocrity. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. She continued for another 20 minutes, walking through timelines and procedures and legal requirements she half understood. Kept using the phrase, my attorney advises, to lend authority to claims that were sometimes accurate and sometimes completely wrong. Nobody challenged her. Nobody asked to see the detailed accounting she claimed to have prepared. They trusted her because she sounded confident and had printed documents and baked cookies that were now being passed around on a plate. I took one. Chocolate chip, slightly burned on the bottom. Ate it slowly while Elise explained how estate taxes worked, getting several details wrong in ways that would benefit her and cost the estate. At 1:45, she started wrapping up. If everyone's comfortable with this proposal, I'll need you to sign acknowledgement forms. Not legally binding, just documenting that the family agrees with the distribution plan. It'll make probate easier. She pulled out another set of papers. Uncle Morris signed immediately. Aunt Diane signed. Janet and Derek signed together, whispering briefly before putting pen to paper. Then everyone looked at me. The holdout. The problem. I stared at the signature line. Let the moment stretch. Felt the pressure of their expectations, their desire for me to just comply and make this easy. Finally I picked up the pen. Before I sign, can I get a copy of the detailed expense accounting? Just for my records. Elise's jaw tightened for half a second before the smile returned. Of course. I'll email it to you early next week. The files are on my work computer. And the caregiver reimbursement documentation. Same thing. It's all digital. I'll send everything once the estate account is set up properly. I nodded. Set down the pen without signing. I'd like to review the documentation first. Just to understand the numbers. I'm sure it's all correct, I just like to see the details. Professional habit. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Uncle Morris looked confused. Janet looked concerned. Elise looked like she wanted to reach across the space between us and strangle me. But she kept smiling. Rusty, this is family. You don't trust me. It's not about trust. It's about being thorough. Dad would want us to do this right. The invocation of Dad's name was strategic. Positioned my caution as honoring his memory, not doubting her integrity. She couldn't argue against that without looking defensive. Fine. I'll get you the documentation. But we need to move forward soon. There are deadlines. I understand. Just want to make sure I understand everything before signing. I stood up. Thanked everyone for coming. Shook hands. Made small talk about the weather and the traffic. Elise walked me to the door, her hand tight on my elbow, guiding me away from the others. At the threshold she leaned close, voice low. What are you doing? Just being careful. Like you said, we need to do this right. You're stalling. Why? I met her eyes. Let her see nothing but tired confusion. I'm not stalling. I'm grieving. And I want to make sure Dad's wishes are honored. That's all. She searched my face for signs of rebellion, for evidence I was playing an angle. Found only the same agreeable expression I'd worn for 62 years. Finally she released my elbow. I'll send you the documentation Monday. Thank you. I appreciate it. I walked to my car through rain that had intensified to a downpour. Got inside. Sat in the driver's seat. Checked the voice recorder in my pocket. Still running. Still recording. I'd captured everything. Every claim she made. Every promise to provide documentation. Every statement about her role as executor before being legally appointed. Every fraudulent expense she'd tried to bill to the estate. I had her on tape committing probate fraud in front of witnesses. Claiming authority she didn't have. Billing for services she hadn't provided. Promising documentation that didn't exist. The point of no return had just passed and Elise didn't even know it. I started the car and drove home, windshield wipers screeching, voice recorder still running in my pocket, evidence accumulating like water in a bucket. Soon it would overflow. Soon she'd drown in it. But not yet. First I'd let her file that executor petition. Let her commit to her lies in legal documents submitted under penalty of perjury. Let her cross from family dispute into criminal territory. Then I'd pull the floor out from under her and watch her fall. Monday morning Elise filed her executor petition at probate court. I knew because she sent a group text to the family at 11:23 a.m. with a photo of herself standing outside the courthouse holding the stamped filing papers, smiling like she'd just won something. The message read, "Official now. Petition filed. Judge Patterson assigned. Hearing scheduled October 12th. Thanks for all your support during this difficult time." Uncle Morris replied with a thumbs up emoji. Janet sent a heart. Aunt Diane wrote, "So proud of you." I stared at that photo for 5 full minutes. Elise in her navy business suit, hair styled, makeup perfect, holding legal documents like a trophy. The confidence in that smile was absolute. She believed she'd already won. Believed the hearing would be a formality, a rubber stamp on her authority. Believed I'd crumble or comply or simply disappear into irrelevance while she liquidated Dad's life and pocketed the proceeds. The documentation she'd promised to send me never arrived. Monday passed with no email. Tuesday morning I sent a polite text, "Hi Elise, just following up on the expense documentation you mentioned. Want to review before the hearing. Thanks." 3 hours later she replied, swamped with estate paperwork. "Will send when I have a chance. Don't worry, everything's in order. Don't worry." Translation: Stop asking questions. Stop being difficult. Trust me and stay out of the way. I didn't reply. Just saved the text message to a folder labeled Evidence, Communications, and continued working. My apartment had transformed into a war room over the past 3 days. The particle board desk was covered in printed documents organized into labeled folders. Transaction records. Bank statements. Signature analysis. Timeline of events. The voice recording from Saturday's meeting, transcribed and annotated with timestamps. I'd purchased a small printer from an electronic store, nothing fancy, just something that could produce clean copies without me having to use the office equipment at work and risk questions. Spent 6 hours Sunday printing and organizing everything into a master evidence binder with tabs and page numbers and a table of contents. The kind of organizational system I'd built 1,000 times for corporate audits. Professional. Thorough. Irrefutable. Tuesday afternoon I made the call I'd been preparing for. The law office of David Chen and Associates, estate litigation specialists, located downtown in a building I'd driven past 100 times without noticing. The receptionist transferred me to a paralegal who took my basic information and scheduled a consultation for Thursday at 2 p.m. Fee structure was $300 per hour with a $5,000 retainer for estate contest work. I had $11,000 in my savings account, money I'd been setting aside for a new car after the Camry finally died. That could wait. This couldn't. Wednesday evening my phone rang. Elise. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the recording. "Rusty, it's me. Listen, I've been thinking about your questions at the meeting. I get it, you want to understand the numbers. That's fine. But I'm starting to feel like you don't trust me, and that hurts. We're family. Dad would want us working together, not fighting. Call me back so we can talk about this like adults." Her voice had that wounded quality she'd perfected, the suggestion that my caution was a personal betrayal rather than basic due diligence. The subtext was clear: stop asking questions or you're the bad guy. Manipulating me through guilt, through the language of family loyalty, through the implication that questioning her was the same as dishonoring Dad. I didn't call back. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail to my email, preserving it, then made detailed notes about the content and timestamp. She was trying to isolate me emotionally the same way she'd isolated me socially at the funeral. Paint me as the problem. Make my reasonable requests seem unreasonable. Thursday at 2 p.m. I sat in David Chen's office on the 14th floor of a glass tower downtown, looking out at the city through windows that were tinted against the glare. Chen was 40-something, efficient haircut, pressed suit, the kind of attorney who probably billed every 6-minute increment of his day. His desk was clear except for a legal pad and the evidence binder I'd brought. He'd been reviewing it for 20 minutes while I sat in the leather chair across from him, not speaking, just waiting. Finally he looked up. "Mr. Klein, this is extraordinary documentation. How long did this analysis take you?" 3 weeks in May. Another week organizing it for presentation. You have accounting background. 41 years as office manager. Payroll compliance was part of my responsibilities. He flipped back to the signature analysis. And your father knew about this fraud? He knew. Asked me not to prosecute while he was alive. I gave my word. But now he's deceased and your sister is attempting to become executor of an estate she previously embezzled from. Correct. Chen leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. This is winnable. Very winnable. The fraud is documented. The forgeries are provable. The timing of her executor petition combined with her history of financial misconduct creates a compelling argument for denial and potential criminal referral. What's the process? You file a counterpetition objecting to her appointment as executor and requesting your own appointment instead. We attach this evidence as exhibits. The probate judge reviews both petitions and makes a determination. Given what you have here, your sister's petition will almost certainly be denied. How soon can we file? I can have the counterpetition drafted by Monday. You review and sign Tuesday. We file Wednesday. That gives us a week before the scheduled hearing. Do it. Chen quoted the fee structure. $5,000 retainer, $300 per hour for court time and document preparation, estimated total cost between $8,000 and $12,000 depending on how aggressively Elise fought back. I wrote the check sitting at his desk, my hand steady despite the fact that I was spending most of my liquid savings on a legal fight with my sister over our dead father's money. The check was for $5,000 exactly. Chen took it and stood, extending his hand. We'll win this, Mr. Klein. The evidence is too strong. But I need to warn you, family litigation gets ugly. Your sister will likely retaliate. Are you prepared for that? She's been stealing from my father for a decade. I'm prepared for whatever comes next. I left his office at 3:15 and drove home through afternoon traffic that moved in thick clots around construction zones and accidents. The sky was gray, threatening rain again, the kind of weather that made my knees ache and reminded me I was 62 and getting older. But my mind felt sharp. Clear. The mechanism was in motion now. Retribution had been activated. No turning back. Friday morning the group text from Elise arrived at 9:47. Family update, I've been reviewing Dad's financial records and found some irregularities I need to discuss. Calling a meeting for Sunday at my place, 3 p.m. Everyone should attend. This is important. I read that message 4 times. Irregularities. She'd found something or thought she had. Or more likely she was manufacturing a crisis to distract from my questions about her documentation. Creating a new narrative to shift focus. Uncle Morris replied first, what kind of irregularities? Elise, would rather discuss in person. Don't want to worry anyone prematurely. Just need everyone there Sunday. Janet, is this serious? Elise, could be. That's why we need to meet. The phrasing was careful. Vague enough to create anxiety without providing details. Making people show up out of fear that something catastrophic was happening. I didn't respond. to the group text. But an hour later Elise called me directly. I answered this time. "Rusty, did you see my message?" Her voice was tight, strained. "I saw it." "What irregularities?" "I'd rather not get into it over the phone." "Can you come Sunday?" "What's this about, Elise?" A pause. Then her voice shifted, became almost accusatory. "Did you know Dad had a safety deposit box?" My chest tightened. I hadn't known. Dad never mentioned it. No. Well, he did. At First National. I found the key in his desk. The bank says you're listed as co-holder on the box. That stopped me cold. What? Your name is on the access list. You and Dad. Which means you could have accessed it any time. Did you? No. I didn't even know it existed. The bank says it was opened in June. Someone accessed it on June 18th. Was that you? June 18th. 2 days after I'd shown Dad the fraud analysis. 2 days after he'd cried at his kitchen table looking at evidence of Elise's theft. My pulse was hammering, but I kept my voice level. I didn't access anything. I don't know what you're talking about. Then who did? Because the bank's access log shows someone with authorized access went into that box and the contents are gone. Empty. And you're the only other person who could have done it. She was building a narrative. Accusing me of stealing from Dad's safety deposit box. Trying to flip the script, make me the thief instead of her. Turn the family against me before I could turn them against her. Classic preemptive strike. Elise, I don't know anything about a safety deposit box. Maybe Dad emptied it himself. He could barely walk by June. How would he get to the bank? I don't know. But I didn't touch it. We'll see. I'm requesting the bank's security footage. If you're lying, Rusty, this is going to get very ugly. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my apartment staring at the phone, trying to process what had just happened. Dad had put my name on a safety deposit box I didn't know about. Accessed it after learning about Elise's fraud. Removed the contents. Why? What had been in there? What had he hidden that was important enough to require a safety deposit box? And why had he put my name on it if he never told me it existed? Unless he'd intended to tell me but died before he had the chance. Unless the box contained something he wanted me to have, some kind of insurance or evidence or protection he'd prepared. I called David Chen's office. Got the paralegal. Explained the situation in clipped sentences. She put me on hold, then Chen picked up. Mr. Klein, this safety deposit box accusation, do you have any knowledge of it? None. But I think my father may have put something in there after learning about my sister's fraud. Something he wanted protected. If she's claiming you stole from it, she might use that to argue you're unfit to be executor. It's a deflection tactic. We need to get ahead of this. How? Request the bank records yourself. You're listed as co-holder, you have rights to access logs and information. Find out what was in that box and when it was emptied. If your father did it himself, that's your defense. I'll go to the bank tomorrow. Good. And Mr. Klein. Don't attend that family meeting Sunday. Anything you say will be twisted and used against you. Let me send a letter to your sister informing her you're represented by counsel and all communication should go through me. Do it. Saturday morning I drove to First National Bank, a granite building downtown that looked like it had been constructed during the Depression and never updated. Brought my driver's license and Dad's death certificate. Waited in the lobby for 20 minutes before a bank manager named Patricia Sims called me into her office. I explained the situation. Showed identification. Asked for the access records on Harold Klein's safety deposit box. She typed on her computer, squinting at the screen. Box number 473. Opened. June 4th of this year. Co-holders Harold Klein and Russell Klein. Last accessed June 18th at 2:37 p.m. by Harold Klein. My father accessed it. Yes, sir. He signed the access log. We verified his identification. What was in the box? I'm sorry, we don't maintain contents records. Only access logs. Is it empty now? She hesitated. I'd need to verify that with you present. You're authorized to access it. Would you like to do that now? 10 minutes later I was standing in the vault room, a windowless space that smelled like metal and old paper, while Patricia used 2 keys to open box 473. She pulled it from the wall and set it on the table. Opened the lid. Empty. Completely empty except for a thin layer of dust. There's nothing here, I said. Appears so. Your father must have removed the contents during his June 18th visit. Did he leave with anything? A bag, an envelope. I wasn't working that day. Let me check the notes. She reviewed her computer. The access log just shows he was in the vault room for approximately 15 minutes. No notes about what he removed. I stared into the empty box. Dad had put something here. Something important enough to rent a safety deposit box 2 weeks after learning his daughter was a thief. Then he'd removed it 2 days later. Taken it somewhere. Hidden it somewhere else or destroyed it or given it to someone. But who? And what had it been? Patricia was watching me with professional sympathy. Is there anything else I can help you with? Can I get copies of the access logs and the rental agreement? Of course. She printed them while I stood there trying to piece together Dad's thinking. He'd known he was dying. Known Elise was dangerous. Created this box and put my name on it, but then emptied it before telling me it existed. Why? Unless he'd changed his mind. Decided whatever protection he'd planned wasn't necessary. Or decided to handle it differently. The documents Patricia handed me showed the box had been opened June 4th, 5 days before I'd even started the fraud analysis at Dad's request. Which meant he'd suspected Elise's theft before I confirmed it. Had been preparing defenses. Building his own case. Then what? What had changed between June 4th when he created the box and June 18th when he emptied it? I drove home with more questions than answers. Spent the afternoon reviewing my timeline, trying to find the pattern. My phone buzzed at 4:30. Group text from Elise, reminder, family meeting tomorrow 3 p.m. Very important everyone attends. Rusty, this concerns you especially. I didn't respond. At 5:15 another text, this time direct from Elise to me, I know what you did, Rusty. Tomorrow everyone else will know too. Last chance to come clean. My hands tightened on the phone. She was bluffing. Had to be. She had no proof I'd touched that safety deposit box because I hadn't. But she was setting the stage. Building toward some kind of public accusation that would poison the family against me before the probate hearing. Making me the villain in her story. I forwarded the text to David Chen with a note, she's escalating. What do I do? His reply came 30 minutes later, nothing. Don't engage. Don't attend the meeting. Let her perform for an empty audience. And be ready. Your counterpetition gets filed Wednesday. After that, everything changes. Sunday's family meeting happened without me. I stayed in my apartment, curtains drawn, working through the final details of the counterpetition David Chen had drafted. 73 pages of legal argumentation supported by exhibits labeled A through M. Exhibit A was the complete fraud analysis. Exhibit B was the handwriting expert's affidavit. Exhibit C through J were bank records, corporate filings, transaction logs. Exhibit K was the voice recording transcript from the family meeting where Elise had claimed executor authority before being appointed. Exhibit L was the email and text message record showing her refusal to provide documentation. Exhibit M was a sworn affidavit from me detailing the timeline of events, Dad's request for confidentiality while alive, and my decision to come forward after his death. The document was perfect. Cold. Factual. Devastating. At 4:30 p.m. my phone started buzzing. First Uncle Morris, Rusty, where are you? Elise says you stole from your father. Is that true? Then Janet, please call me. I don't understand what's happening. Then Aunt Diane, very disappointed in you. Your father deserved better. The accusations came in waves. Elise had performed exactly as expected, told the family I'd emptied Dad's safety deposit box and stolen contents worth tens of thousands of dollars. Turned them against me with a story I couldn't refute because I didn't know what Dad had put in that box or where it had gone. I didn't respond to any of them. Just saved the messages and forwarded them to Chen with a note, documented evidence of defamation and witness tampering before hearing. His reply, perfect. She's destroying her own credibility. See you Wednesday at 8 a.m. to review before filing. Monday and Tuesday crawled past. Work was impossible to focus on, so I called in sick, the first time I'd used sick leave in 4 years. Spent both days in my apartment reviewing the counterpetition until I had sections memorized. Rehearsing what I'd say if the judge asked questions. Preparing for every possible angle of attack Elise might use. Tuesday evening I pressed my good suit, the charcoal gray one I'd worn to Dad's funeral. Polished my shoes until the scuffed leather looked almost presentable. Set out a clean white shirt and the blue tie Dad had given me for Christmas 3 years ago. Tried to sleep but spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios, feeling my pulse hammer against my ribs. Not fear. Something else. Anticipation. The mechanical satisfaction of watching a plan come together. Wednesday morning at 7:45 I met David Chen outside the probate court building. He was carrying a leather briefcase and looked calm, professional, completely in control. I felt like I might vomit. "You ready?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, let me do the talking unless the judge asks you direct questions. Stay calm. Don't react to anything your sister says. We have the evidence. That's all that matters." We filed the counterpetition at 8:15. The clerk stamped it, assigned it to Judge Patterson's docket, and informed us there was an emergency motion hearing at 10 a.m. since both petitions were now in conflict. Emergency. 2 hours. Chen had warned me this might happen, that contested executor petitions sometimes got expedited hearings when there were accusations of fraud or misconduct. They'll both be heard today? I asked. Most likely. Judge will want to resolve this quickly. Estate settlements have timelines. At 9:30 Elise arrived with her attorney, Martin Stewart from Stewart & Holmes. She saw me across the courthouse lobby and her face went through a sequence of expressions I'd never seen before. Confusion, then recognition, then something that looked like rage compressed into a smile. She walked over, Stewart trailing behind looking uncomfortable. "Rusty. What are you doing here?" "Filing a counterpetition. Objecting to your appointment as executor." Her smile froze. "On what grounds?" "Fraud. Embezzlement. Forgery. Take your pick." Stewart stepped forward. "Mr. Klein, I'd advise you to be very careful about allegations you can't prove. Defamation is a serious matter." Chen handed him a copy of our filing. "My client can prove every allegation. It's all documented in the exhibits. You might want to review that before we go in front of Judge Patterson." Stewart took the document and started flipping through it. I watched his expression change as he saw the evidence. The bank records. The signature analysis. The transaction logs. His face went pale. He pulled Elise aside and they had a whispered conversation I couldn't hear but could read in their body language. Her gestures getting more agitated. His posture getting more defensive. At 9:55 a bailiff called both cases. We followed him into courtroom 4B, a wood-paneled room that smelled like old books and floor polish. Judge Patterson was already seated, a woman in her late 50s with steel gray hair and reading glasses that made her look like someone's disappointed grandmother. The bailiff announced the cases. Estate of Harold Klein, deceased. Petition for letters of administration by Elise Klein. Counterpetition by Russell Klein. Judge Patterson looked at both attorneys. "Gentlemen, I've reviewed both filings this morning. Mr. Chen, your counterpetition makes serious allegations of fraud and requests denial of Ms. Klein's petition based on documented misconduct. Mr. Stewart, has your client had opportunity to review these allegations?" Stewart stood. "Your Honor, we received the counterpetition less than 2 hours ago. We haven't had adequate time to prepare a response. The allegations are supported by 70 pages of exhibits. How much preparation do you need to respond to bank records?" Stewart hesitated. "Your Honor, These accusations are baseless attempts by Mr. Russell Klein to discredit his sister due to a family dispute over estate distribution. There's no fraud. This is a vindictive sibling trying to control assets he has no right to. Chen stood. Your Honor, I'd like to present Exhibit A through the court. It's a forensic analysis prepared by my client documenting 23 fraudulent transactions totaling $142,600, embezzled from the decedent's hardware business between 2014 and 2017. The transactions involve forged approval signatures and payments to a shell company operated by Ms. Elise Klein. Judge Patterson gestured. Approach. We walked to the bench. Chen handed up the fraud analysis. The judge read the summary page, then flipped to the signature comparisons. Her expression hardened. She looked at Elise. Ms. Klein, did you operate a business called E. Klein Services between 2014 and 2017? Elise stood, her voice shaking slightly. Your Honor, I provided legitimate consulting services to my father's company. Those were authorized payments. The forensic analysis suggests the authorization signatures were forged. Did you forge your father's signature on payroll approval forms? No. He approved those payments verbally. Do you have any documentation of that verbal approval? No, but he knew about the payments. He never objected. Judge Patterson set down the analysis and removed her glasses. Ms. Klein, your father is deceased and cannot testify to verbal approvals. What I have here is documentary evidence suggesting systematic fraud. That's a serious problem for someone seeking to be appointed executor of the same estate she allegedly embezzled from. Stewart tried to intervene. Your Honor, these allegations should be investigated separately. The executor petition is a different matter. I disagree, Counselor. Fitness to serve as executor includes financial honesty and trustworthiness. If Ms. Klein embezzled from the decedent during his lifetime, she's manifestly unfit to manage his estate after death. The judge flipped to another exhibit. I also see here a recording transcript where Ms. Klein claimed executor authority and attempted to collect fees before being appointed. Is that accurate? Chen nodded. Yes, Your Honor. My client recorded a family meeting on September 21 where Ms. Klein presented herself as executor, distributed settlement proposals, and attempted to collect $15,000 in fees from the estate. This was 9 days before she filed her petition. She was acting as executor without legal authority. Judge Patterson looked at Elise with an expression that could freeze water. Did you represent yourself as executor before this court appointed you? Elise's composure was cracking. I was just trying to organize things. The family needed leadership. The family needed legal process, which you circumvented. Mr. Stewart, does your client understand she may have committed probate fraud? Stewart was sweating now. Your Honor, I was not aware of these actions. My client may have been overzealous in her estate planning, but there was no criminal intent. That's for prosecutors to decide. Judge Patterson turned to the bailiff. Note for the record that I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential probate fraud and elder financial abuse. Elise made a sound like she'd been hit. Your Honor, please, I was just trying to help. My brother is lying about this. He stole from our father's safety deposit box. He's the criminal, not me. Chen stood. Your Honor, my client has never accessed the safety deposit box in question. Bank records show the decedent himself emptied it on June 18. Ms. Klein's accusation is unsupported and appears to be a deflection tactic. I have those bank records, Judge Patterson said, holding up another exhibit. They confirm Mr. Chen's statement. Ms. Klein, making false accusations in court doesn't help your position. Elise turned to me then, across the courtroom, and I saw her face completely stripped of pretense. The confidence was gone. The manufactured warmth was gone. What remained was raw panic and hatred. You did this, she said, her voice breaking. You waited until Dad was dead. You planned this. I didn't respond. Just sat there meeting her eyes while she realized what had happened. How completely she'd been outmaneuvered. How thoroughly I'd documented her crimes. How badly she'd underestimated agreeable, emotional Rusty who never caused problems. Judge Patterson's gavel cracked against wood. Ms. Klein, you will not address the opposing party directly. Mr. Stewart, control your client. Stewart put a hand on Elise's arm but she shook it off. He's been planning this for months. Pretending to be sad. Pretending to be cooperative. He was building a case the whole time. Probably because you'd been stealing for years, Judge Patterson said coldly. And he had the good sense to document it properly before bringing it to court. She closed the file folder in front of her. I'm denying Ms. Elise Klein's petition for appointment as executor. The evidence of financial misconduct is overwhelming and she is unfit to serve in a fiduciary capacity. I'm granting Russell Klein's counterpetition and appointing him executor of the estate of Harold Klein, effective immediately. The gavel came down again. Final. Irreversible. Elise made a choking sound. Stewart was already gathering his papers, probably calculating how quickly he could withdraw from representation before the criminal investigation started. Chen leaned over and whispered, "You won. Complete victory." But I wasn't watching him. I was watching Elise collapse into the chair beside her attorney, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking. The sister who'd stolen from our dying father. Who'd tried to steal from his corpse. Who'd turned the family against me with lies and manipulation. Who'd thought she could win through confidence and social pressure. She'd forgotten what I did for a living. Forgot that accountants don't get emotional. We find discrepancies. We document them. We report them. We let the system correct the malfunction. Judge Patterson was still talking, setting timelines for estate administration, ordering Elise to turn over all estate documents and financial records within 48 hours. I heard it distantly, like sound traveling through water. My hands were steady. My pulse was normal. Inside my chest that mechanical tightness had released, the ratchet finally reaching its final tooth and locking into place. The work was done. The case was closed. Justice, cold and factual and irrefutable, had been served. The district attorney filed charges 3 weeks later. Wire fraud, forgery, embezzlement, probate fraud. For felony counts carrying a combined maximum sentence of 20 years, though the prosecutor told me plea negotiations would likely reduce that to restitution and probation for a first-time offender. Elise hired a different attorney, someone who specialized in white-collar criminal defense and charged $500 an hour. She'd have to sell her house to pay the legal fees. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd stolen $142,000 trying to secure her financial future and now she'd lose everything defending herself from the consequences. The family fractured predictably. Uncle Morris stopped speaking to both of us, declaring the whole situation a shameful betrayal of Dad's memory. Aunt Diane sent me a long email explaining how disappointed she was that I destroyed my sister's life over money. Cousin Janet called once, asked if there was any way to make peace, then gave up when I explained there was nothing to negotiate. Elise had committed crimes. I'd reported them. The system was handling it. That wasn't vengeance. That was process. I settled Dad's estate in 41 days, faster than Chen had predicted. Paid every creditor, filed every form, distributed every asset according to the will Dad had written in 2016, before the cancer, before Elise's escalation, when his mind was clear and his intentions were documented. The will left everything to me and Elise equally, 50-50 split. But estate law allowed me as executor to deduct Elise's prior embezzlement from her inheritance. $142,600 subtracted from her half. She ended up with $18,000 after the estate was liquidated. I ended up with $214,000. The house in Briarcliff sold for $228,000 to a young couple with a baby and a dog. I watched them walk through during the final showing, the wife pointing out where they'd put a swing set in the backyard, the husband talking about converting Dad's workshop into a home office. They loved it. Made an offer that same afternoon. I signed the sale papers in Chen's office and felt nothing except the relief of closing a transaction properly. Dad's retirement account transferred to me as designated beneficiary. His car went to a dealership for $4,200. His tools I kept, packed carefully in boxes that now sat in a storage unit on the edge of town. I wasn't sure what I'd do with them. Didn't have space in my apartment. Didn't have projects that required a full workshop of equipment. But they'd been his, worn smooth by 40 years of his hands, and I couldn't sell them to strangers. The prosecutor's office kept me updated on Elise's case through victim notification emails that arrived every few weeks. Arraignment scheduled. Plea hearing scheduled. Sentencing scheduled. The language was bureaucratic and emotionless, reducing my sister's destruction to calendar dates and docket numbers. She pleaded guilty in December to 2 counts of fraud in exchange for dropping the forgery and probate charges. Sentence was 5 years probation, full restitution of $142,600, and 200 hours of community service. No prison time. The judge cited her lack of criminal history and her attorney's argument that Dad's decision not to prosecute during his lifetime suggested some level of forgiveness or mitigation. I sat in the back of the courtroom during sentencing and watched Elise stand before the judge to accept her punishment. She'd lost weight. Her hair was different, shorter, grayer. She didn't look at me. The judge asked if she had anything to say. She spoke for 2 minutes about her regret, her shame, her recognition that she'd betrayed her father's trust. Standard allocution, probably scripted by her attorney. The judge thanked her for her statement and imposed the sentence. Gavel down. Case closed. I left before she did, walked out into cold December air that stung my lungs and made my breath visible. The parking lot was mostly empty. My Camry sat in the far corner where I'd left it, covered in a thin layer of frost that I'd have to scrape before driving home. I stood there for a moment looking at the courthouse behind me, a granite building that looked exactly like the bank where I discovered the empty safety deposit box. Institutional architecture. Permanent. Impersonal. Built to outlast the people who passed through it. I never found out what Dad had put in that box. Never discovered what he'd removed on June 18th or where it had gone. I'd searched his house during estate settlement, gone through every drawer and closet and cabinet. Found nothing except normal possessions. Clothing. Photographs. Kitchen supplies. The usual accumulation of a 71-year life. Whatever he'd protected in that safety deposit box had vanished with him. Maybe he'd destroyed it. Maybe he'd given it to someone. Maybe it had never been important in the first place, just an old man's paranoia during a time when cancer was eating his mind along with his body. I'd stopped wondering about it sometime in November. Accepted it as one more unanswered question in a case that was otherwise completely resolved. On January 3, 2026, I submitted my retirement notice at work. 30 days advance warning, professional and courteous. My supervisor asked if I was sure, reminded me I could work another 5 years before mandatory retirement. I thanked him for the concern and confirmed my decision. Effective February 1, I would no longer be office manager at Bergman & Associates. After 41 years, the spreadsheets would belong to someone else. I used part of my inheritance to pay off the apartment lease and put a deposit on a small house 40 minutes west of the city. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, attached garage, 1/3 of an acre. Built in the 1980s and showing its age in the cracked driveway and dated kitchen counters. But it had good bones and a basement where I could set up Dad's tools if I ever figured out what to build with them. Closing was scheduled for February 15th. I'd be moved in before the end of the month. Start of something new. The retirement I'd planned before Dad got sick. Before Elise decided to steal his legacy. Before I'd spent 6 months transforming into someone who destroyed his own sister to protect a dead man's wishes. The Camry's windshield was covered in frost thick enough that I couldn't see through it. I found the scraper in the back seat, cheap plastic thing that had been there since I bought the car used 12 years ago. Started clearing the glass in long strokes that left wet streaks across my gloves. The physical work felt good. Simple. Methodical. Something I could complete properly without lawyers or judges or evidence binders. Around me the parking lot was empty except for a few cars belonging to court staff. The sun was setting early, winter light going gray and flat. My knees ached from standing too long in the cold courtroom. My lower back was stiff. 62 years old and feeling every one of them. But my hands were steady. My mind was clear. The work was done. I got in the car and started the engine, waited for the heat to kick in while I sat in the driver's seat watching my breath fog the windows I'd just cleared. Elise would spend the next 5 years on probation, reporting to a parole officer, paying restitution she couldn't afford, watching her life contract into something small and supervised. The family would remember this as the time Rusty destroyed his sister over money. Would tell stories about greed and betrayal that cast me as the villain despite the documented proof of Elise's crimes. I didn't care. Let them think what they wanted. I had the estate settled. Had the assets distributed. Had the evidence filed and preserved. Had done exactly what Dad would have wanted if he'd been strong enough to do it himself. The defrost was finally working, warm air clearing the windshield from the inside. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the parking space, turned toward the exit, drove toward the highway that would take me home. The city passed by outside my windows, familiar streets I'd driven for decades. Office buildings where I'd worked. Grocery stores where I'd shopped. The life I'd built through steady accumulation of small dignities over 40 years. That life was ending. The new one hadn't started yet. I existed in the space between, executor of a closed estate, early retiree with nowhere specific to be. Free in a way I hadn't been since before Linda left, before Dad got sick, before I understood that agreeable people get used until they finally learn to say no. Traffic was light on the highway. I merged into the right lane and set the cruise control at exactly the speed limit. No rush. No deadline. Just the drive home through winter twilight to an apartment I'd be leaving soon. To storage units full of a dead man's tools. To a future I'd purchased with money earned by destroying family bonds I'd never particularly valued anyway. Some people would call that cold. Would say I should have forgiven Elise, worked something out, chosen family over justice. Those people had never spent 40 years managing other people's money, watching how easily trust gets weaponized, how quickly kindness gets mistaken for weakness. I'd learned the lesson Elise never had: systems work when you follow procedures. Evidence matters more than emotion. Documentation beats manipulation. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is correct the malfunction before it spreads. The exit for Riverside Drive appeared ahead. I signaled, merged, took the ramp down to surface streets. The apartment building was 6 blocks away. Third floor walk-up with water-stained ceilings and neighbors who fought on Thursdays. 1 month left in that space. Then the house with the basement workshop and the cracked driveway and the room to finally spread out. I parked in my usual spot and climbed the stairs slowly, joints stiff, breath coming harder than it used to. Unlocked the apartment door. Inside was dark except for the streetlight coming through windows I never bothered curtaining. The particle board desk sat where it always did, empty now, the evidence binders packed away in boxes labeled for storage. I'd kept 1 copy of everything. Not because I expected to need it. Just because procedures required documentation, and old habits died hard. I made coffee in the measuring cup. Sat at the desk. Opened my laptop to check email and found a message from David Chen with the subject line, Estate of Harold Klein, Final Accounting. I opened it. Read the summary. All debts satisfied. All assets distributed. All legal requirements met. The estate was officially closed. Probate case terminated. My appointment as executor discharged with the court's thanks for efficient administration. I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet apartment drinking bad coffee that had gone lukewarm while I read. Outside my window the city hummed with its usual noise. Traffic. Sirens. Lives continuing in their complicated trajectories. I'd spent 6 months untangling one small knot in that complexity. Found the fraud. Documented it. Reported it. Watched the system correct what my father had been too kind to fix. The coffee tasted like metal but I drank it anyway. Tomorrow I'd go back to work for another month of transition. Train my replacement. Close out projects. Say goodbye to coworkers who'd never known what I was capable of because I'd never needed to show them. Then retirement. The house. The basement full of tools. Maybe I'd build something. Maybe I'd just sit in the quiet and let the years pass peacefully. Either way, I'd earned it. Paid for it with inheritance and integrity and the willingness to do what needed doing when everyone else wanted to look away. Elise had mistaken my silence for consent. My patience for weakness. My professionalism for incompetence. She'd built her entire strategy on the assumption that agreeable Rusty would stay agreeable forever. She'd been wrong. And now she'd spend 5 years learning what I'd always known: never mistake kindness for weakness. The two look similar until you push too hard and discover which one you're dealing with. I finished the coffee. Rinsed the measuring cup. Turned off the desk lamp. Went to bed in an apartment I'd be leaving soon, to start a life I'd protected by destroying the person who tried to steal it. No regrets. No second thoughts. Just the clean satisfaction of a case properly closed and a malfunction permanently corrected. The work was done.